them, and they're organizing to fix it, which is a good thing. I saw this interesting movie on my flight over here. I don't know if you've seen it, Midnight in Paris.
Yeah, Woody Allen, right?
Exactly, and I sort of went out and said, if there was an era you could live in, what era would it be? So a lot of people responded back to me and telling me when it would be on Google Plus and on various social networking platforms. People came back, and it's funny, very few people want to be in the era we're in.
That's what I was saying. That's why I called it global disenchantment. Not such a big word.
But my point is, I think that...
Why are we all feeling so cynical right now about the world we live in?
But my point is, it all depends on your mindset. You could be disenchanted if you were in a different era because you could tell me all the things that didn't work at that point in time. Or you could say this is a phenomenal opportunity. People are gathering together. Try and fix it. I'd much rather be the optimist.
Fair enough. Talking about disruptive technology, which in a sense is what the internet was and is to begin with, what is Julian Assange to you? Is he an example of the creative force and the complete freedom that comes with the internet, or is he a dangerous guy?
Ooh, I think we're confusing too many metaphors. Right? I mean, the internet is purely a platform. Now, you're going to tell me the fact that we have roads, does that mean people can get from one place to the other and organize it?
Yeah, I get that.
Together,
you can do whatever you want to with technology.
You can do good things, you can do bad things.
So what is he to you?
Well, I don't know. I don't see him as typifying of anything. All that has happened is as a consequence of what he's done. A lot of information which is out there has become more public. People have access to more information, which goes back to my earlier point. Now, it depends on how we choose to use the information. If you choose to use it to fix something, choose to use it for the good, great. If you choose it in a bad way, it's a bad thing.
But, you know, the world is grappling with these questions, and the internet, as we understood it, was an area which you could not actually police in any way. Now you come to, let's say, what happened in Norway, where what we used to dismiss as just mere random hate rantings on the net actually had to be taken very seriously. In India, for example, some people react very seriously to what's written about them on the net. Some people say, it's on the net, leave it. What would your response be?
I think people react very interestingly to things that you would say about them or you would write about them. It doesn't have to be on the net. I mean,
but the net does
I'd react
promote a
the same
certain
way
kind
if it
of
was in the newspaper.
Self-obsession, doesn't it? Google does particularly. Does it?
Narcissistic self-obsession.
No, this interview is not about you laughing at my big words.
No, I love these big words. It's all very good. I just like, you've decided you're going to pick on the internet and that's the bane of our problems.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you a serious question. How do we deal with hate and abuse on the internet when the conventional understanding is the internet works because there are no rules?
No, I think, look, I go back to the fundamental notion. The internet is a reflection of society. The only difference is it is more transparent now than it used to be. All the problems you're talking about existed before, we just didn't know about them.
Agreed.
Now you know about them. Now, the fact that we know about them, we're actually doing something about them. Earlier we didn't know about them. Same thing with your television. You know, you didn't know when, I don't know, 100 years ago, you didn't know if there was an earthquake somewhere. You found out because a carrier pigeon came by and you just happened to the mail guy showed up.
Phantom Comics, it was
something like the mail guy showed up once a month with a letter, and your sister wrote you a letter saying, oh, we had an earthquake last month. Right now you know about it yesterday. Like you know about it in
or not send you a link.
Oh, I Google myself and the is not big.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But forget it not being good. What it was just completely outlandish, wacko, complete lie. Like Wikipedia keeps marrying me off. And there's like sometimes it's the same guy, sometimes it's different guys. I used to try and, you know, say
the guy all the time.
I don't know, I lost track, I stopped looking. I'll give you an example. People sometimes find complete libelous things about themselves, you know, show the internet as a published forum or a kind of informal diary, you know, blog of somebody that they should
It's sort of depends on what part of the internet, right? So it's
what would you do? That's why I asked you, what would you do?
It's like saying if the front of New York Times said that about me, I'd be concerned. Because it's a reputable brand, they've gone and said something libelous or something inappropriate. If it was found a scrap of paper,
what's a blog for you? If it's found on a random blog where they said you're,
again, it goes down.
You broke into somebody's house and you stole
it goes down to weight in the credibility of the blog, right? If it's a credible blog, if somebody who's claiming to be a journalist or somebody who's claiming somebody who's in the business of producing credible information, I'd want to call that person and challenge them, and most likely, if that person was trying to build a little brand, they take it down. Somebody scribbling it on a piece of paper and leaving it for somewhere you can see it. I'm not going to chase everybody who's got something written on a piece of paper.
fair enough.
It just has to be written on the internet now.
How do you respond to anonymity online? You're on Twitter. So many people have completely wacko handles. They don't tweet as themselves. Right. As a principle, what do you think of anonymity online?
Look, the world will only know as much about you as you want them to know.
So you think that's okay? You don't think that's kind of dysfunctional? Yeah. I'd like to know who I'm talking to. I think that I'm on Twitter and Google Plus, and sometimes, there is that whole, or even if somebody writes me an email, and if they write them as themselves, I feel much more comfortable responding than if they make up some gobbledygook identity. Isn't that normal, natural?
No, that's
I don't
fair,
know what's normal, but isn't that
yeah,
natural?
Of course, that's fair. But then it's your choice. You can choose to respond to the ones with the gobbledygook identities, or you can choose to respond to people who have real names. I'm presuming you would know that that's a real name. Look, I think again, it's back to the notion of, like you said, the notion of anonymity. So if I represent myself as me, and I ask you a question, you're more likely to answer it as opposed to if I'm somebody who you don't recognize. Both will happen. It again depends on your choice. Which one do you want to interact with? How you want to deal with it?
Tell me, since you're back in India, does the India story seem different to you? A, at a sort of just the India story level, and B, as personally, as you said, you grew up the son of an Air Force officer, middle class home, where a premium was placed in those days, we grew up on the cusp of liberalization on education more than anything else. Suddenly you have all of our institutes, the great institutes, even the IITs being debated. You have people like Narayan Murthy sort of saying, maybe our brightest students don't get the best faculty that they should have. I'm just wondering how you're looking at India today with all of these debates going on here.
Look, it sort of goes back to our conversation about the golden era and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
Is India better off than it was 20 years ago? I'm sure.
Yeah.
I just came down 30 miles, and you couldn't probably come down 30 miles as quickly as I did, despite all the traffic 20 years ago. So there are things that have improved. Are there things that we could fix more? Yes, we can. And the fundamental challenge I think India has is continuing to invest in the infrastructure that is required to maintain an over billion people. And I think that's where the struggle is. And that's something we need to work at as a society, as the government, as the private sort of the public sector and the private sector. And if you fix a lot of the infrastructure stuff, a lot of those things will go away. Whether it's in education, whether it's in transportation, whether it's in roads, whether it's in any kind of infrastructure, you name it. I think there is a bit of a challenge in this country where we're not able to get our infrastructure up and running to support the population we have. And that I think if you fix that, it applies to almost every field that you're talking about. Speak
a little bit about the years that formed you educationally here. Time was when people wouldn't want to send their kids abroad till after graduation. I mean, that was a curve that we all followed. You did school, you did college, and then you went wherever you went.
This was 3 stages of life, right?
They were
you
study, stages of life.
You work, you marry, you have children, and you die.
But what I want to ask you is, how did those years shape you? And when you compare it to the education you had outside, because I know in one of your interviews you said that, today you think when your daughter goes to school, there's just too much flexibility in the system because we grew up with that rigorous Indian education system. How do you think our system compares? Because you've had both experiences.
Actually, it's interesting. My theory on my child and how this thing impacts them has evolved as I've seen her.
It's changed, do you think?
No, it's not changed. I think it depends on the person, right? Some of us were driven in one way, some of us are driven the other way. So you got to figure out what our passion is. And some people respond better to a more stricter education than other people who respond better to flexible education. So I think it's fair to say, in generalization,
both ideas can work.
Both ideas can work, and the British system or the Indian system is way more rigid or way more strict and forces you to get disciplined. And the American system is perhaps a little more flexible. I think there's an answer for people. There's an answer for people who like this, and an answer for people who like that.
Did you like your school and college here?
I'm glad that they were strict, otherwise I probably wouldn't have ended up getting my degree.
Because you were a vagrant child?
Actually, funnily enough, I probably didn't want the strictness over here. And when I went to the US, I was so rigorous about what I wanted to do because I wanted to make sure that I didn't disappoint my family, that I probably studied harder than I did over here. So it sort of worked out the other way for me.
Now, the Indian diaspora, in many ways, in the United States of America, has been regarded as a kind of model immigrant community.
Some parts of it, yes.
Well, largely. I'm just wondering how much of that is changing with, we've seen a whole eruption of a controversy over the Rajaratnam, Rajat Gupta case. All the protagonists in the story, even the Attorney General's office, the prosecutor, are of South Asian origin. Do you think that's changing any perceptions there?
We got to be careful. You can't take one or two people and start characterizing an entire population of over a billion people, or more than that in the South Asian sort of region. I think we are model immigrants because, to be fair, we've grown up in a country where many of us have grown up in a constrained resource environment. So actually you learn how to optimize, you learn how to fend for yourself, you learn how to see how you can bring the sort of most out of things and succeed. So I think that kind of behavior is model immigrant behavior.
But did it shake up the community when the Rajat Gupta Rajaratnam controversy erupted, or was it treated as an individual case? Because
it is an individual case. At the same time, would you have preferred it not to happen? Yes, of course you would have preferred it not to happen, but it is an individual case. You can't make such a big deal out of it that you suddenly say, oh my God, everybody who looks like them or is of the same color has the same problem. No, I mean, you wish it hadn't happened, but it's an individual case, and you move on.
The other big, not thing, but book being debated in America right now is, of course, Steve Jobs' biography by Walter Isaacson. I'm 3/4 through it, but not very flattering about Google. Just that bother you guys?
I haven't read it yet.
But you've seen the press, you've seen
people's tweets.
You've seen the tweets, you've seen the Android described as a grand theft. And Steve Jobs saying, if there's one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to get these guys.
Look, Steve Jobs was a genius, right? Unequivocally. Our founders have learned a lot from him. Many people I know who know him well think he was a genius, and he has been. Look at what he's been able to do, you know. You can go be successful once. There are many people who've done one thing great once. He's gone and done it multiple times. And it is his personality and his passion and his ability to sort of think ahead and spot trends that has made him do that. I think that's great.
But that doesn't answer my question. I mean, you've seen all the press. You know, Steve Jobs right now, especially because of the tragic way and the stage in which he died, people are emotional about him. Everybody's hanging on to every word he's saying. And he's saying Google stole my idea.
Look, I think from my perspective, as I said, Steve was a genius. He did great things for Apple. He did great things for the tech industry. I think he did great things with Silicon Valley and the whole idea of entrepreneurship. So I think it is best not to debate past that. I don't want to debate what he said in the book and what was said. I haven't read the book, but I think we should remember him as a great man for what he did for all of us and for technology, and leave it there.
Tell me this, that you're always asked, what's the next big thing? And you say it's going to come not from another rival, it's going to come from those two boys in a garage.
So look at that. Look, you know, and Google came from a garage with two boys, and was the next big thing. It came from some other garage in Palo Alto, which is now a social network. The next thing, which was Twitter, came from another two guys from somewhere else. It didn't come from any large company. I mean, the only large company just come out with cool stuff so far in the last 10 or 11 years has probably been Apple or Google or some stuff. So yes, some stuff does come from companies like Google or Apple, but a majority of stuff comes from garages and two guys or one guy or some smart people somewhere.
But what do you think? Can you anticipate at all which direction that next big idea is moving towards? Because, you know, we are all soon going to be using one form of a smartphone or the other. A laptop is going to soon become passé, I guess. You said quite interestingly once that you don't actually believe in convergence as the future, you believe in divergence as the future.
Yes.
Are you saying we're going to have to carry more than one phone? I already carry two. How many do you carry?
I carry two.
Two?
I'm got to have the other one just in case the first one goes away.
But divergence could mean different gadgets for different gizmos.
But don't we do that today? I mean, how many devices do you actually rely on today? Way more than you did a few years ago.
Yeah.
Look, I think what is interesting I found is that every last trend sets the foundation for the next one. So if you go back in history, just restricting ourselves to the internet, if you go back and look what happened, you know, people started putting information up on what is called the internet at that point in time. Suddenly there was so much information, you needed a logical way to be able to search through it. So, you know, the web was about information, it was all out there, and suddenly you went out and you had a search engine, it became really popular because everybody's out there. I couldn't remember URLs in my head, you couldn't remember things, but now you know if it's on the web, just go to Google or some other search engine and find it. That's sort of set that stage. If you think what happened thereafter, is there was so much information and we're all trying to make sense of it. Yet almost everybody in that meantime started getting connected to the web. So you almost felt like if there's anybody out there connected, they're on a social network. So your next tendency is to, if I want to think about people, I'm going to go find them on the web somewhere. And the web has become more about people than it has about information. Because I just don't want to know that this information is out there, as we debated about, you know, did somebody write something credibly and it's a real name, an anonymous name. I think it's becoming more and more important for us to know who the person is on the web. It's about people. I want the recommendation from other people. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to go on. So, you know what? And if you think about what's happening is, you're seeing ubiquity around the world. Everybody's connected to the web. You are seeing access speeds go up tremendously. You're seeing new devices which are more compact. They're available. You can carry them around, do whatever you want. So I think, my perspective is what's going to happen is all digital information is going to go up there.
Yeah.
And I consider what we're